Forgive me if this is a bit messy, as this is my first time doing like a book video. Typically on this channel I do gaming content and song covers and vlogs. I'm not really a book YouTuber, but I had to talk about this. So this is Five Nights at Freddy's Fazbear Frights #1, Into the Pit. It's actually a collection of 3 stories. Into the Pit is just the name of the first one, and I think also the name of a newer FNaF game. I feel like I've also seen this art on Steam. Also, if you hear chaos going on, it's my cats. For those who don't know, when I was little, I was super into Five Nights at Freddy's. Like, FNaF 1 through 4 were my shit. That's actually the reason I started this YouTube channel, was so that I could make content about Five Nights at Freddy's. I would still consider myself, like, a light fan of the series, but even as a self-proclaimed fan, I can say that Scott Cawthon is not a good author. I don't think that's a hot take. I remember I had bought Silver Eyes, like, right when it came out, and I tried reading it, and I couldn't finish it. But this is just short enough to where I could finish it. Now, as I'm recording this intro, I've only read, like, 10 pages. So the clips you'll see throughout this video are going to be later, obviously. The way I'll structure this is after I finish each of the 3 stories, I will record a segment, and then at the end, I'll talk about, the book as a whole, give my thoughts, give my review. Also, because I'm like a light fan and FNaF lore is so convoluted, I'll mostly be reviewing this just like as a book rather than as a piece of FNaF lore or anything like that. I will read the logline on the back first, though. Five Nights at Freddy's fans won't want to miss this pulse-pounding collection of 3 novella-length tales that will keep even the bravest player up at night. Let's see if that holds true. I also quickly want to shout out my friend Lisette. Me and her went to Barnes & Noble, and I got this while we were there because I thought I could make a video about it, because I thought it would be bad. So far, I've been right. Anyways, she's been very excited about me making a video of this. So, hi Lisette. So, it's only been a couple hours since I filmed the intro, but I have finished the first story in this book, the titular Into the Pit. You'll see why it's called that beyond just a connection to the game by the same name. Spoiler alert, I guess. I'm just gonna go through what happens in it. Personally, I like videos about books I'll never read that just explain what happens. So that's what I'll do. This is gonna be a very spoilery video. If you actually want to read this, then I guess read it and then come back. So it opens up and we meet Oswald. He's our kid for this. You can't have a FNaF story without following a kid. I would just like to point out that on the very first page, the following exchange happens. Nothing looks deader than a dead possum. Except this town. That's how we start. So basically, Oswald lives in this, like, dying town. It's giving major River Street vibes from the Tangerine Bear, Home in Time for Christmas. Anyways, his family's poor. The mill in the town shut down, and now everyone there is, like, struggling, and the town sucks. His best friend moved away. The kids at school make fun of him because his name is Oswald. Scott Cawthon also calls Lee Harvey Oswald an assassin, which I find funny. I mean, I guess it's technically true. He did assassinate somebody, but I wouldn't call him an assassin. I would just call him a guy that killed someone. Assassin makes it sound way cooler. Makes me think of Assassin's Creed. That's not bad writing, I just found it funny. And then on page 6, he just abruptly mentions that he's been sketching mechanical animals, specifically bears, bunnies, and birds. He imagined them being human size and moving with the jerkiness of robots in an old science fiction movie. And then he describes going on to draw them with their endoskeletons exposed. So this kid might be a serial killer in the making, but also that's just so funny. Like, why? Why is this his fixation? Subtlety is not Scott Cawthon's forte. By the way, these sketches are never important. You're gonna notice that a lot. There's a lot of things that you think will be important and then don't come up again. These sketches are one of those. But anyways, the school year ends and it's summer vacation, which sucks because he's poor. And his best friend moved away. So basically he's going to be alone and not be able to do much exciting things. His mom works overnights at a hospital and his dad works a part-time job. I'm only saying this because his dad is very important to the story and the mom is there, but she's not nearly as present. That's why. We have Scott Cawthon trying to sound younger than he is. Hold on, I need to look up how old is Scott Cawthon. He's 47. Okay, yeah, that sounds about right based on the things in this book. So his dad is talking about dropping him off at the library during the days while he does his part-time job, and the dad says, "You could read, surf the net." Oswald couldn't let this one slide. How out of date could his dad be? Nobody says surf the net anymore, Dad. They do now. Because I just said it. Dad forked up some macaroni. Like, okay, Scott. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, but they used to have money before the mill shut down that turned the town to shit. His dad worked at the mill, I think. So his childhood was more exciting, and that leads to him being, like, kind of resentful. I say his childhood like he's an adult. He's in like middle school, I think. But his like early childhood was a lot more exciting, and that frustration will build up and will be important later. So the plan for each day is that he'll go to the library, pick up a book, surf the net, and then he'll go to the local pizzeria, Jeff's Pizza, to get a slice of cheese pizza and a soda so that he's not starving. They also make it a point that his dad doesn't give him enough money to get toppings on the pizza, just adding to this idea of like financial issues and resentment building. But this Jeff's Pizza place is creepy and is pretty obviously what used to have been a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He says, "Oh, there's a giant empty stage. There's all these, like, outlets along the wall where presumably arcade machines would be. But now it's just a shitty, tiny, small pizza place." Jeff is also a fucking weirdo, but that also never goes anywhere. Like, he keeps making a point to point out how weird Jeff is, and I kept thinking, oh, is Jeff gonna secretly be the purple guy? No, Jeff's just a fucking weirdo. Again, there's always like Chekhov's guns that don't go off, and it doesn't feel like a clever subversion, it just feels like Scott Cawthon forgot to tie up all these different things. The pizza was decent. Oh, and I just found this funny because it's a very obvious bit of foreshadowing. But one night, as Oswald is going to bed thinking about how boring his summer is about to be, he says, "Please let something interesting happen." Subtle, Scott. He really likes bacon. That's another thing that it's just a detail that Scott threw in, I guess. Oswald really likes bacon. His mom makes him breakfast. That's usually when he gets to see his mom. Oh, I'm going to read just like an entire paragraph because it reminded me a lot of a short story. I'll tell you what the short story is after, but I want you to listen as I'm reading this and see if you can guess. Jeff's Pizza was as weird as he remembered. The big empty space beyond the booths and tables was like a dance floor where nobody danced. The walls were painted a pale yellow, but they must have used cheap paint or only one coat because shapes of whatever had been on the walls before were still visible. It had probably been some kind of mural with people or animals, but now it was just shadows behind a thin veil of yellow paint. Oswald sometimes tried to figure out what the shapes were, but they were too blobby to make out. I'll give you a couple seconds. It's the yellow wallpaper. It was reminding me of the yellow wallpaper. If you don't know, the yellow wallpaper is a short story. It's a horror short story about a woman suffering from postpartum depression, and she's like holed up in a room, and there's yellow wallpaper, and she keeps being convinced that she's seeing shapes behind it. And the story basically just describes her descent into madness over this yellow wallpaper. Do I think this was an intentional connection by Scott Cawthon? No, I think it's just a coincidence that the cheap paint happened to be yellow, but I still found it interesting and I wanted to point it out, because that's what it made me think of. Okay, so next to this old stage where presumably Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica would be, there's a ball pit. You know, like the name of the book, and also on the cover. So there's this ball pit, and I'm going to say this now because I just need you to keep in mind. The way they describe this ball pit makes it sound like it's fairly small. Yeah, it just sounds smaller than it ends up being. I don't know if that was just me visualizing it wrong or if that's Scott again, but it weirded me out. Also, the book that Oswald is reading, he just describes it as a world where kids with secret powers went to a special school to learn how to fight evil. I don't know if that's referring to a specific book, It's very generic. And also, I thought this would have some kind of, like, connection later on. Like, maybe he would go to a special place and have powers or something. Which would be stupid, but at least there would be a reason for him to say that. This never comes up again. It's one of the many Chekhov's guns in this book that never go off. But yeah, I don't know what book he's reading. So Jeff ends up being nice, but then Oswald still points out that Jeff is weird. Oswald is kind of a judgmental piece of shit. That sounds mean because he's a kid, but it comes up a lot. Like, he's weirdly judgy. He starts talking about how when he was younger, his family would have these family fun nights where they would go out and do something fun. And now their family fun nights are usually spent indoors where they watch a movie they'd rented from Redbox. I haven't heard that name in a long time. This book is dated to 2020. I guess that's when this book came out. I mean, Redbox was a thing in 2020. The last time I saw Redbox, the most recent movie they had was the Barbie movie. But he says this so casually. Initially, I was like, oh, does this mean this takes place a little while ago? But so far as I can tell, there's nothing to indicate this doesn't just take place in a modern day. Showing your age there, Scott. Why are they renting from Redbox? Especially because they reference Netflix later on. Wait a minute. Yeah, because later he mentions having Netflix. Why the fuck are they whatever. Oh, here's a small, I think, typo. So he's talking about these family fun nights, right? And then he says, sometimes when the weather was nice, they'd have a family fun night. I think outside was supposed to be at the end of that sentence. Because then he goes to talk about their outdoor family fun nights. There was a word missing. There's a random line break. Oh my god, hello? There we go. There's a random line break right there. There's no reason for that line break. I found that weird as well. Because line breaks in this book signal a time skip. Not like a huge time skip, but like time passing. No time passes. That one's just in the middle of a conversation. There's also a line I found funny. I'll take a puppet or model over CGI any day. I appreciated that because the Five Nights at Freddy's movies did famously use actual puppetry, not just CGI. So he like crashes out at his dad because he's frustrated about the lack of money. So then here's where we get into the bulk, the real story. Mind you, a third of this story has passed without anything happening, basically. But now that we're like 25 pages in, something happens. So he's mad at his dad for being poor, and he decides to jump into this closed off ball pit at Jeff's Pizza. Because his logic is he's like, it'll give my dad a quick scare, and I'm mad at him, so I want to scare him. So he jumps into this ball pit, but when he gets out of it, he's suddenly in a busy arcade. There's kids everywhere, a billion things happening. Now, most people, I feel, would probably be a bit panicked or concerned. Instead, he looked around and muttered, Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. He's picking now to reference Wizard of Oz, and also keep in mind that he referenced Wizard of Oz. He fairly quickly puts together that he's in the 80s. I found this funny. He describes the animatronics on stage. He's at Freddy Fazbear's, if you haven't gathered, in 1985 specifically. But he says, there was a brown bear, a blue rabbit with a red bow tie, a blue rabbit. So fuck you to everybody who has tried to gaslight me over the years by saying Bonnie is purple. Here, you have Scott Cawthon right there saying a blue rabbit and some kind of bird girl. That made me chuckle because it just reminds me of all the times over the years where people couldn't figure out what the fuck Chica was supposed to be. I still think Chica looks like a duck, at least in FNaF 1. I know she's a chicken, but some kind of bird girl. That made me chuckle. Good job, Scott. You made me chuckle. He calls them creepy, because they are. There's also a random, oh my god, it hates me. Actually, so much. You can barely see it. Right there is a random M dash. Doesn't make sense to be there. It's like that line break. It's like, why is this here? It's just confusing for no reason, and it makes you pause and be like, why is that there? Which isn't really what you want. Anyways, he meets some kids named Chip and Mike. Yes, there's a Mike in this. No, it does not seem to be Mike Schmidt or Michael Afton. Scott Cawthon just really fucking likes that name for some reason. So he makes friends with these kids, and he gets back in the pit, and when he comes out of the pit and is back in the present, it seems like no time has really passed. Keep that in mind as well. Oh yeah, there's also no follow-up on him, like, crashing out at his dad. It was like a pretty notable like argument. I really was expecting something, some sort of follow-up. The only follow-up is that his mom the next day calls him Mr. Grumpy Pants. But there's no like apology to his dad or conversation about that. Whatever, I guess. So he goes back in for the second time, but he says, "Pink eye," Oswald thought, though he had no room to talk the way he was diving into the ball pit these days. Like, this is the second time you've done this. That's a weird way to phrase it, but okay. It makes it sound like, oh, he's just doing this all the time, and it gets to that point. But at this point, this is only his second time in. Whatever. They call him Oz, like from The Wizard of Oz. So that's 2 Wizard of Oz references. They have pizza. Oh yeah, also, this is important. Oswald twice now has noticed a guy in a yellow rabbit costume. I wonder what that could be about. The first time he saw him, the guy was just walking around normally, but the second time he sees him, he's like creepily standing in the corner, and he's weirded out by it, but he doesn't say anything. So this becomes a regular thing where pretty much every day he's hanging out with these random kids who I guess are just at Freddy Fazbear's every fucking day for some reason. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm thinking like Chuck E. Cheese's. That was always like an occasion. Oh, we're going to Chuck E. Cheese. Or even there was a smaller arcade near where I grew up, and I would go there more regularly, but it wasn't like every day. Why are these kids there every day? That's so weird. Oh yeah, here's Oswald being judgy again. "You know what movie I liked?" Chip said. His polo shirt was peach-colored today. Oswald loved the guy, but really, didn't he own one shirt that wasn't the color of an Easter egg? Fuck you. Let the man live. Oh yeah, they also keep harping on the fact that he feels out of place because he doesn't have any, like, real good 80s references. And that's another thing that's never really resolved. Like, I thought it would eventually, like, one of them would be like, "Hey, are you being abused at home? Like, why do you know nothing about anything from the time period you presumably live in?" Or something like that. No, his friends are, like, kind of weirded out by him, but it's not important, I guess. This is another really weird thing that doesn't come up again. So Oswald is feeling guilty about never paying for these hangouts, and suddenly he just has a fuck ton of tokens, like, magically in his pockets. That's never explained, and it never comes up again. He just, okay, there's tokens now. Whatever. I feel like I'm saying whatever a lot, and that's because that's how I feel. I'm like, okay, I guess this is happening now. Oswald brings up the history of the pizza place to his dad, and the dad gets really closed off and weirded out by it. That's also never explained and never comes up again. Being, you know, at least fairly familiar with Five Nights at Freddy's, I can assume that it's because the dad either heard of or was, like, more peripherally closely related to the murders. Basic FNaF lore for anybody who's watching this and has no idea anything about Five Nights at Freddy's. Guy kills a bunch of kids at this pizzeria. It's a huge incident. Shoves their bodies into the animatronics. Like, I can infer that's why the dad was weirded out, but it never comes up again. Again, just one of many things where something is brought up and never comes up again. And each time, it's not like I'm reading into it. Like, I always make a point and put emphasis on these moments, but then they never come up again. Like, he's confused about the coins, and there's a whole paragraph about how weird the coin thing was. And then here, it's like, maybe it was Oswald's imagination, but it seemed like his dad was relieved to get to their destination so he wouldn't have to answer any more of his questions. Why does it not come up again? Scott needs an editor. Maybe he has an editor, but he needs a better one. So this time, he goes into the ball pit and comes back out. Chaos is happening. Children are screaming and running. He wants to go back to the present, but he's concerned for his friends. And then the yellow bunny beckons him to a sketchy back room. And for some fucking reason, Oswald follows him, to which he sees a bunch of murdered kids in birthday party hats. This doesn't come up again. He mentions it once, like, he's weirded out by it, but, like, nothing about the murdered kids comes up again specifically. That would have been a good way to connect why his dad was acting weird about the place, but it just doesn't come up. So he jumps back into the ball pit, and when he comes to the present, his dad and Jeff are there and are like, "What the fuck were you doing in there?" Which doesn't make sense because time doesn't pass while he's in the ball pit, but for plot convenience, it passed enough this time for them to notice. But anyways, the Yellow Rabbit. Can we call it Spring Bonnie? Do I have to call it the Yellow Rabbit? He calls it the Yellow Rabbit and the Yellow Thing the whole time, because obviously he doesn't know its name. But Spring Bonnie lunges out of the pit into the present, grabs his dad, pulls his dad into the pit, climbs out of the pit, and takes Oswald home. Jeff doesn't seem to notice or care. Why is that? This is actually something that is explained. Well, it's sort of explained. It's explained as much as it would make sense for Oswald to be able to explain it. We'll word it like that. Spring Bonnie is able to get into the dad's car without a key. I just found that interesting. He's able to drive Oswald home, presumably without a car key, and continues to drive him around without a car key. Like, he doesn't have a key. How would he have gotten a key? He just doesn't have a key, but he's driving around? Okay. Just one of those little oversights where it's like, Scott, you've presumably driven a car before. You need a key. Even if it's not like a put in and turn key, you typically at least need like a key fob for the car to start. But whatever. So he gets home with Spring Bonnie. He texts his mom and is like, hey, come home right now, something is wrong. His cat is freaked out and is hiding under his bed. But when his mom comes home, she's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Your dad is downstairs. His mom is like, nothing's wrong. Why are you freaking out? So Oswald is like, oh, I guess dad came home and everything's fine now. But notably, his cat is still freaked out under his bed. The next morning, though, Spring Bonnie walks into the kitchen during breakfast and just sits down. And Oswald is like, hey, what the fuck? And his mom is like, what? He's like, where's dad? And she's like, he's right there, and points at the Yellow Rabbit. So that's why Jeff didn't freak out. It's because, for whatever reason, some kind of weird swap has happened. Him and the cat see Spring Bonnie, but everyone else sees just his dad. This goes on for a few days. He starts back at school, he makes a friend. Spring Bonnie makes him a pizza. He sneaks out and goes back to Jeff's pizza, like right before closing, and he goes into the ball pit. And he finds his dad's body. He can't figure out how to get his dad's body out of the ball pit. He's like, do I call my mom? But his mom already came home to, presumably, from her perspective, nothing. So he's like, no. He felt like a boy who cried wolf, or a boy who cried rabbit. Anyways, Spring Bonnie catches up to him, bites him with razor-sharp fangs. Okay. And ends up accidentally hanging himself in the net near the ball pit. The dad's fine, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So Spring Bonnie has been hanged, and is presumably dead. And that is into the pit. So many things were not answered. Some of it can be written off as like, that argument with his dad might have just been resolved in a scene we didn't see. Okay, sure. Fine. I still think it's not great writing if that was just kind of skipped over, but at least you can rationalize, like, how it would have sorted itself out. But then there's so many things that just aren't followed up on. And then also smaller things, like, did the family not notice that their cat was hiding in the son's room all that time? Like, obviously the dad was half dead in a ball pit, but you would think that the mom would notice or something, right? Like, it's just, I don't know, I find that weird. But, like, the coins? What was that about? How does time work in the ball pit? Because that was inconsistent. Oh yeah, that huge epic fight scene makes the ball pit seem a lot bigger than it was initially. I think that was just a weird thing. What about the dead kids? What was the deal with that? Like, I can glean as a Five Nights at Freddy's fan, but this says number 1. This could be an introduction to somebody wanting to get into Five Nights at Freddy's. Especially because this was not very expensive. It was like $10 at Barnes & Noble. I could very easily see a kid being like, I've heard of Five Nights at Freddy's, but I'm not into video games. I'll read this book. And then being confused as fuck because it's terribly written. Why was the dad weirded out by the history of the pizza place? Why was Jeff such a weirdo? A lot of unanswered things, which I don't think will be answered by the 2 other stories, because from the way the back of the book describes them, it sounds like they'll be mostly unrelated, but we'll see. Before we move on to the second story, I want to talk about this. I bought this at Target a while ago, like literally years ago. Never read it. Come to realize it contains graphic novelizations of 2 of the stories in the book, one of which is Into the Pit. So, you know, I gave it a read. The art is fine, nothing to write home about. Some panels look really goofy, but it is what it is. This is a bad adaptation of the story. Because it's a graphic novel, we don't have to read as many weird, comically stupid lines, but it gets a lot of things just off. Like, remember how I said in the story he has a whole point about how Oswald only has cheese pizza because his dad can't afford enough money for him to get toppings? He has pepperoni pizza the whole time. And a lot of smaller things are missed, like Jeff being a weirdo is completely forgotten about, which came up a lot in the story, so it was weird. And little oversights like that without, fixing the weird things. Like the coin thing still happens with the coins randomly appearing in his pocket and then never coming up again. It's just not a very good adaptation of it, and as a standalone, the story isn't great and it still has the same issues that the book does. I honestly think that the novel is better, but I would feel weird not talking about it considering I do have it. So the second story is bad, but it's bad for very different reasons. The first one was just poorly written and had a lot of plot holes. This one didn't really, but the messaging is terrible. It tries to be scary, instead it's just kind of fucking sad. Trigger warning for like body image stuff. Jesus, got it. So it opens with a very uncomfortable description of everything that this girl, Sarah, hates about her body. She's like a freshman or sophomore in high school. She fucking hates how she looks, and she has an eating disorder. This is even pointed out by her mom, who says, "You're much too young to be worried about carbs." And then Sarah, who's also like judgmental because apparently every fucking kid in these books has to be judgmental, thinks, "And you're much too old to not be worried about them," Sarah wanted to say, but she stopped herself. So she's barely eating. This story is very reminiscent of like Heathers or Mean Girls. There's a group of like the popular girls called the Beautifuls. Alexa, play Beautiful from Heathers the Musical. We can be beautiful. I just found this line funny. All the girls had long hair. The better to flip luxuriously over their shoulders. Why is it phrased like the Big Bad Wolf in Little Bit Red Riding Hood? The better to eat you with, my dear. So Sarah's best friend since kindergarten is a girl named Abby. If we're following a Heather's comparison, she's basically the Martha of this story. She's described as wearing some kind of hideous poncho. Again, Sarah's judgy as shit. Anyways, they have a disagreement because Sarah thinks that the Beautifuls are like, she wants to be friends with them, and Abby is like, they're crazy, why the fuck would you want to do that? Yeah, Abby is described as looking kind of awkward, but she could at least see that the opportunity for beauty was there. I don't like it. Oh, here's a bit of cringy dialogue. Sarah laughed. "You're the one who's a super villain." "Nope," Abby said. "I'm just a smart aleck, which is why I'm way more fun than those cheerleaders." Nobody talks like that. Yeah, Sarah hates her body. A lot of this story is just about how much fucking Sarah hates herself. She's particularly insecure of her nose. She said it looks like a potato. Anyways, Abby makes some like very good points about how kind of ridiculous Sarah is being about a lot of things. To which Sarah is a dick and is like, "I've changed. I've grown up and you haven't. I think about adult things and you still buy stickers and watch cartoons and draw horses. Girl, you're 14. Calm down." She also describes her lunch table with her friend Abby as the loser table. I feel bad for Sarah, but she's also a dick. But anyways, she's determined not to be a loser anymore. So she goes to a store to try and get some box dye to dye her hair blonde. She describes the woman at the checkout counter as resembling a giraffe. Again, she's just judgy as shit. Long story short, she gets this box dye. She bleaches her hair and it hurts because she does it too long, but then she tries to dye her hair and it ends out green. So her mom, who has the patience of a fucking saint, takes her to a hair salon to get it fixed. So now she's back to her regular brown hair. At school, she walks right past the loser table and sits at like the opposite end of where the beautifuls are and listens in on their conversation. She feels invisible because they don't notice her. Then as she's walking out, she bumps into her crush, which is this popular guy named Mason, and accidentally spills her salad all over his shirt, and he seems pissed off and she's really embarrassed. She's like massively insecure about how she is compared to the Buglefulls, to the point where she says she was sure that none of the Buglefulls had to pass a place so hideous on their way home. I get the point is that she doesn't have money like they do, but like having to walk by a place to go somewhere, that's such a weird thing to be insecure about. But she passes this junkyard and she finds an animatronic in the junkyard. Now, the way that this animatronic is described, I thought it was supposed to be Circus Baby, but the animatronic's name is Eleanor. Looks very similar to Circus Baby, I'm assuming, just based on how she's described. Thinks Circus Baby, but slimmer and taller. But anyways, Sarah finds her beautiful and takes her back home. She cleans off the animatronic, and when Eleanor is finally activated, she's very thankful for being taken out of the junkyard and cleaned off, and she asks what she can do for Sarah. She asks Sarah what she wants, and Sarah says that she wants to be beautiful. To be beautiful is the name of the story, by the way. I don't know if I said that. Eleanor agrees to this and says that she'll come up with a plan. Sarah doesn't really take it seriously, but whatever. The next morning, Eleanor is not activated. Just for context going forward, Eleanor only seems to activate in the evenings, and it's just this inanimate thing during the day. By the way, none of this registers as a red flag to Sarah. Like, this animatronic is so, like, articulate and is making promises and it only activates at night. Sarah's fucking chilling with this thing. And she continues to not be concerned by it pretty much the entire time. So Eleanor the next day gives her a necklace and tells her never to take it off. She tells her this repeatedly, like every night. She's like, remember not to take off this necklace. Here's a sentence I underlined because I found it funny. Even though she was a robot, everything about Eleanor was so feminine and lovely. Feminine and lovely? Lovely is fine. Feminine is such a weird... It's used as a compliment here, but it's just like a descriptor. And we already know what she looks like. Like, we know she's a very feminine robot. It felt redundant. Anyways, Eleanor insists on singing Sarah to sleep. And it's a little early, but Sarah agrees. Now here's where some body horror shit starts. Sarah wakes up the next day and finds that her arms are different. They're slimmer, they're, you know, smooth. Her nails are painted, her fingers are longer and more slender. Now, I immediately clocked where this could go, but I'm not gonna say it. Just, you know, she wakes up, her body's different. And she's not scared by this or concerned at all. I would be horrified. That's some body horror shit. But she's just happy because she thinks it makes her more beautiful. The mom even notices. The mom's like, did you paint your nails? Oh, here's something that comes up that wasn't answered or explained or anything. Sarah starts feeling hungrier. I mean, one could say it's because she's fucking anorexic and isn't eating anything, but it's like a major point that she suddenly feels ravenously hungry sometimes. That's never explained or followed up on, but it does come up like once or twice. That day at school, she goes to the bathroom and one of the beautifuls notices her nails, so she's really excited. Here's another thing that's not followed up on, is Sarah is like, hey, can you sing me to sleep in a few hours so I can do my homework and dinner? And Eleanor seems like kind of annoyed by this, but it never comes up again. So I don't know why they made a point of that. I'll let you sing me to sleep, Sarah said, but could it be in a few hours? I need to eat dinner with my mom and then do homework. If you must, Eleanor said, sounding a little disappointed, but it is necessary that you let me put you to sleep as early as possible. It's important that you get your beauty rest. But then Sarah continues to do it later every day, and it's never addressed. So, who knows? I didn't like the way this was worded. When Sarah that day is finally ready, she says, I'm ready. And then Eleanor says, then get in bed like a good girl. I think the internet has ruined the phrase good girl. It made me viscerally uncomfortable. Even with that, like the internet ruining that phrase, that's still fucking weird for this animatronic to say. But again, no red flags to Sarah. So the next day, Sarah is taller, and her legs are all smooth and pretty, and her toenails are painted. Her mom says that the past year or so, her kid had been in an awkward phase, which is just, like, crazy and out of pocket. You're starting to outgrow it, hello? So the next day, Sarah and Abby apologize to each other for their little dispute, even though it was like entirely Sarah's fault, and Abby shouldn't have to apologize for anything because she was just being honest. Sarah's boobs get bigger. I just found that weird that that's a point Scott wrote into it. I feel weird talking about it because this character is 14. Anything in particular you're looking for? Her mom asked. Sarah looked down at her chest and grinned sheepishly. Oh, her mom said, sounding startled. Well, those certainly snuck up on me. Of course we can buy you some bras that fit. Ew. It's weird, Scott. I don't know who's gonna tell 47-year-old man Scott that's weird. Like, why did you make a point out of that to be like, hey, this 14-year-old has big boobs now? okay. I don't know, that one just, it didn't sit right with me. She runs into her crush again, but this time he doesn't seem annoyed because she's hot now. Like, that's the vibe. Pretty privilege is real. Scott Cawthon proved it. They have a nice conversation. Abby says, there's something about you lately. What do you mean? Abby crinkled her forehead the way she did when she was thinking hard. I don't know. I can't exactly put it into words. It's like you're glowing from the inside out. Sarah smiled. Yeah, that is what it's like. But really, it was the changes on the outside that were making her glow inside. I find it weird that it kind of validates her eating disorder, but whatever. So later on, Sarah hugs Eleanor and thanks her for everything. When Eleanor hugs her, she feels a flicker of what could have been fear, but she quickly pushed the feeling away. There was nothing to be afraid of. Eleanor was her friend. So still somehow nothing is clocking to her as a red flag. Like again, this is body horror. Your body is changing without your knowledge. What the fuck do you mean? So then Sarah tells her that she wants her face to be fixed. And Eleanor is like, but that's what makes you unique. It would be shocking to have a completely different face, but Sarah says it's a shock she wants. That's never followed up on. It's a whole page of Eleanor being like, are you sure? But the next morning, her face is fixed, and she's, like, fine with it. I don't... Okay. And her mom doesn't know this. Eleanor tells her it's because all moms think their kids are beautiful no matter what, so she wouldn't notice. Which doesn't... That's not how... Whatever. Doesn't make sense, but fucking whatever. At lunch, she mouthed hi at Abby, then walked straight to where the Buglefools were sitting. So she just, like, ignores Abby and sits with the Buglefools. I thought this moment would have some sort of backlash, but it doesn't. So she sits with the Buglefools, passes their, like, social test to see if she's cool enough for them. And then they literally tell her it's a trial period for their friendship, okay? Like the most stereotypical, non-realistic mean girls on the planet are these girls. I would expect nothing more from Scott Cawthon. So Abby's telling her that they're shallow, because they are. Sarah's pissed off. She says, you could be beautiful too, Abby, and just is generally really shitty. Abby says, you have changed, Sarah, and not for the better. Sarah knew Abby was a little mad at her, but she also knew an apology and a hug would fix things once she had time to cool down. Sarah's a piece of shit. Again, I feel bad judging this girl because she's like 14, but she's being a dick. So she goes out on a little ice cream date with Mason, and they plan a pizza and movie date. Gotta have pizza. Gotta have it. Oh yeah, Sarah also randomly has a Freddy Fazbear plush, and that's never addressed again. I just found that funny. Like, it says, oh, my Freddy Fazbear plush, and it's like, girl, what? So I guess she's been to Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, but it has literally no bearing on anything whatsoever. She talks to Eleanor, thanks her. Eleanor reminds her again not to take the necklace off. And then it says she knew she'd never have a better friend than Eleanor. Girl, what about your actual best friend? What about Abby? Abby is a better friend than the fucking scary robot that's causing real legitimate body horror. Her date with Mason goes well. She says that people who eat pineapple on pizza deserve to be alone. So now that she's fixed, Eleanor only now is starting to creep her out. But only a little bit. She has her trial hangout with the Beautifuls. It goes, like, fine. They're all dicks and they say some really shitty things. But no matter what they said or did, she was just happy to be included. So she's fine with having shitty friends because it makes her look popular. Okay, Sarah. So that night she has a nightmare where she's on a date with Mason, but then when she turns, it's Eleanor there instead of Mason. And Eleanor is like extra scary in this dream. And then when she wakes up, Eleanor is standing over her watching her sleep. And she's like, hey, what the fuck? And Eleanor is like, oh, I do this every night. And only now is Sarah starting to get like actually a little bit concerned. Sarah didn't sleep well. She didn't know what, but something was wrong. Girl, you think this has been going on for fucking how long now and only now you're concerned? After this spooky robot you got from a junkyard fucking body horrored your body to look completely different? Only now you're concerned? Piss me off. So the next day, the Beautifuls are making fun of Abby, Sarah's friend. Sarah slips and falls. The Beautifuls are laughing at her, but then she realizes with horror that the necklace came off. And, unsurprisingly, because this was clearly where this was heading, she starts turning into a mechanical monster. Like a super rusted animatronic made of like just exposed gears and all this shit. Everyone's horrified. She runs home, terrified. She's like, I gotta talk to Eleanor. Eleanor will know what to do. She can't find Eleanor anywhere. Eventually, she gets to this one cabinet in the garage, and when she opens it, bags full of human body parts start falling out. And then she realizes that it's all her body parts from how she looked before, which is terrifying enough, but then Eleanor walks in and she presses a button and then turns into the old version of Sarah. Meanwhile, the actual Sarah is turning into this mechanical monster, and then the final lines are, "She was nothing but a rusty, dirty pile of junk. She felt sad, she felt scared, and then she felt nothing at all." So that was To Be Beautiful. In terms of a horror story, fucking terrifying. That's like really scary body horror. I don't like it. Messaging is awful. It's clearly going for a, like, be careful what you wish for type message, but it's about a teenage girl with an eating disorder. This teenage girl who has severe body image issues and really should just be in, like, therapy, instead basically gets punished in the worst way possible for having these, like, wants. That's terrible. Why the fuck did you write that, Scott? It doesn't have as many, like, plot holes. It still has a few. There's still a few loose ends that are not tied up in that story, because Scott loves his untied loose ends. But overall, it's just sad. Like, it's scary, obviously. I will credit it. The horror has been good. Into the Pit, gaslighting with his dad being swapped with the rabbit, scary. The body horror, deeply upsetting. But it just doesn't sit right with me because it's just this depressing story about a girl with an eating disorder having her body literally taken from her and then essentially being left to die. And I don't like it. I didn't like that story at all. Yeah, I don't know. That one just kind of grossed me out, and not in the ways that I was hoping it would. To Be Beautiful was the other story adapted in here, so I read the graphic novelization. It's a much better adaptation than Into the Pit was, and also the, like, not very good art is much more acceptable with this story than it was for Into the Pit. A lot of the weird, uncomfortable, like, character descriptions obviously aren't here since it's all visual, so that definitely helps. The story is still depressing and I don't like it, but the graphic novelization for this one I would say is overall a lot more palatable, and I do think the graphic novel version of this particular story is my preferred one. I thought the first two stories were insufferable. So the third story is called Count the Ways, and it's really bad. Who's surprised? So it starts off with a cold open where we're introduced to our main character of the story, a 14-year-old girl named Millie, and she is right inside of the belly of a animatronic, and the animatronic is listing off ways to kill her, hence the title Count the Ways. She calls him a bear, which implies that he's Freddy, and then later in the story he's described as pink and white, so this is presumably a variation of Funtime Freddy. Anyways, it's Christmas when this is happening, and he basically says, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you." And then we cut to, like, a little while before. So she's a goth girl. She loves Edgar Allan Poe. She named her cat after some character from an Edgar Allan Poe story. She has a black cat, because of course she does. This is the most, like, stereotypical, unrealistic, annoying goth character I've ever read about. She's fucking insufferable, and you'll see. She describes her parents as flighty and impractical, which I don't feel like any 14-year-old, no matter how much they like Edgar Allan Poe, would ever fucking say. Anyways, her parents are moving away to Saudi Arabia because her dad got a teaching job there, and she is given the option to move with them or live with her grandpa. After lots of crying and raging and sulking, she decides to live with her grandpa. She describes him as a collector. Really what she means is that he's a hoarder. The house is a fucking mess. Her bedroom isn't edgy enough, I guess, for her tastes. She's a big fan of this musician named Kurt Carrion. I looked it up. He's not real, but he's like a metal rock guy, and she's a big fan. He's vegetarian. Her grandpa says, "You always look pale," to which she says, "I like being pale." I fucking hate this girl. "You know I don't eat meat, Grandpa. Meat was gross, and also murder." Shut the fuck up. Listen, I have all of the respect for vegans and vegetarians. I don't have respect for them who treat people who aren't vegan and vegetarian like they're lesser than. So her grandpa's trying to figure out what she likes to eat because he wants her to be happy there. Millie pushed her plate away. "It's a waste of energy to try to make me happy. I'm not a happy person. And you know what? I'm glad I'm not happy. Happy people are just lying to themselves." I fucking hate this girl. So she goes to her room and Googles famous poems about death because this girl isn't fucking real. She writes a bad poem about death that she decides is not bad. It's bad. I'll read it for you. Let's read this. Oh, death, show me now your ravaged face. Oh, death, how I long for your chilly embrace. Oh, death, my life is such a misery that only you can set me free. I get she's 14, but that made me viscerally angry. Anyways, her grandpa knocks at her door, to which she screams, "What?" and slams shut her book. It's like a textbook for homework. She's actually so terrible. Anyways, her grandpa brings her cookies, which she refuses to admit that she likes. Anyways, we cut back to the present where she's been bored by this fuck-ass animatronic. It keeps cutting between this present and the past. The present segments are so badly written they made me, like, upset to read, because it's just this animatronic, basically just filler of him listing off ways to die. Usually some historical context to the type of, murder, which I did Google some of it, and it all seems to be historically accurate, and him making bad puns. I found this funny though. He says, lots of opportunities for languishing. You like languishing. He's talking about how she could die of dehydration, and he says, but that's death for you. So glamorous, so romantic. Are you making fun of me? Yes, he is, and it's really funny. He says, I'm here to make your wishes come true, and I just wrote again. I don't know if you've gathered, I've been marking to help with the video. I just found that weird because the last story, what the fuck was that? The last story was all about wishes coming true and an animatronic trying to make a character's wish come true and it being like a be careful what you wish for. They did be careful what you wish for twice in a row, and both times it's fucking stupid. Except this time it's less problematic because she doesn't have an eating disorder. The animatronic thinks that she's suicidal, but she's not. She just romanticizes death. But it's like, you want to die so fucking bad? Fine, I'll kill you. Which is inherently funny. Anyway, she doesn't believe in Christmas. Not for religious reasons, but just because she fucking hates joy. People could wish her Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays until they turned Santa Claus red in the face, but she wouldn't say it back. I actually fucking hate this girl. Anyway, she's at school, and this blonde cheerleader, Millie didn't even know her name. Sure, I don't believe her. I'm sure she probably did know the cheerleader's name. Calls her Dracula's daughter. Basically, because she's goth, everyone at school calls her Dracula's daughter. I feel like that's such an unrealistic nickname. Like, yes, people make fun of goth kids, but Dracula's daughter? That's the best they could fucking come up with. Anyways, we're told more about her parents, and her dad's name is Jeff. And at first I was like, oh, is this the same Jeff from Into the Pit that owns Jeff's Pizza? No, there's just two Jeffs. There's 3 Mikes, there's 2 Jeffs, and there's about to be 2 of another name, but we'll get to that. Can Scott Cawthon not come up with more than the same 5 names? I genuinely don't get it. But basically, her parents are the type of people who jump from hobby to hobby, and they were always kind of financially unstable, but they kept food on the table. Her parents are weird, and now they're in Saudi Arabia. Dracula's daughter, or Jeff and Audrey Fitzsimmons' daughter, either one was a one-way ticket to being a social outcast. I think you being goth and also fucking insufferable is what makes you a social outcast. I don't think it has anything to do with your parents. Anyway, she used to have this friend named Hannah who is now, like, no longer really her friend because she became friends with all the popular girls. And that makes her sad. But then a lot of things made Millie sad. She's reading The Fall of the House of Usher, which whenever I hear that title, I know it's a horror story. I can't help but think of Usher, like the musician. A guy named Dylan comes and sits with her, and he's also like alternative. Again with the repeating names though, because Dylan was also the name of Oswald's school bully in Into the Pit. And again, this is not the same Dylan. Why can't Scott come up with more than the same 5 fucking names? Anyway, she immediately has a crush on him. She hoped a blush wouldn't pinken her paler. I had to look up what that means because they use the word paler a lot. It just means pale complexion. This is supposed to be like a book that middle schoolers can read. Why are you using an obscure ass word? But they hit it off and she has a crush on him. And he knows a lot about goth jewelry and she finds that really cool. So we cut back to this fuck ass situation with Funtime Freddy. He's still just listing off ways to kill her. She asks him if he can find a fucking hobby besides killing people, to which he says, I like to kill people, and you want to die. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, like those little birds that pick the parasites off of rhinoceroses. It's so fucking stupid. This whole story is so fucking stupid. To which she tells him that she doesn't want to die, not really, and he laughs at her. So back to before, she hints to her grandpa that she has a little crush, and he reminisces on his deceased wife. He describes himself as an old dude. I cannot imagine a elderly man describing himself as a dude, but he connects with her over Edgar Allan Poe and talks about his deceased wife, which makes her reflect a little bit on how hard that must have been for him. This is one of the only times that she shows any sort of empathy. Now, mind you, I quite literally lack empathy as a part of my autism, but I try not to be a dick about it. She's just an asshole this whole time. Back to the animatronic shit, he says that talk is always easier than action. He's like trying to goad this girl into suicide. It's kind of funny, but also fucked up. He talks about impalement, and he says one little old impaling can't be that hard, can it? He's so fucking unserious. I don't know how I'm supposed to find this scary. Because if you haven't gathered, this is the crux of the horror for this story, is the situation with this animatronic. But he's so fucking unserious, I can't be scared by it. Anyways, back at school, Dylan gives her an H.P. Lovecraft book. She's just impressed that he gave her a book or anything. In her experience, boys weren't usually this thoughtful. When I first underlined it, my immediate thought was, oh, he must be a trans man then. But she started reading it and she likes it a lot. It was the perfect gift for Dylan to give her. Millie wasn't a flowers and candy kind of girl. And now because she has a crush, instead of Googling poems about death, she looks up poems about love. She writes another fuck-ass poem. You clipped away the black thorny vines that twisted around my wounded heart so it could beat and feel relief from pain. You are the gardener who wakes the plants from the gray, chilly death of winter so that they can blossom again, like my heart, a slow blooming blood red rose. Funtime Freddy talks about electrocuting her to death. I don't have a chair to strap you into, but I do have the power to shoot a series of strong electrical currents through my body cavity. Because remember, she's inside his body. Which, may I just say, she doesn't talk about, like, feeling super stuck. I think she says the word claustrophobic, like, once, but, like, how fucking big is this animatronic to comfortably fit a 14-year-old girl? And also she's like able to move around and shit. Like, how ridiculously large is this animatronic? Because I imagine she's just like in his stomach area. I don't get it. It feels unrealistic. I think it is unrealistic. The animatronic calls her Cupcake, which is just weird and also reminds me of Arcane. Anyway, she goes to the library and finds that there aren't any more Lovecraft books, which is unfathomably based of that library because Lovecraft was horrifically racist. But she runs into Dylan, who I guess conveniently is at the library at the same time, and he finds her a copy of The Lottery and Other Stories by Shirley Jackson. I actually saw a play adaptation of The Lottery that my high school did my junior year, but I wasn't a part of that because I was doing the full-length play at the time. I had a lot of lines, so I didn't want to learn more lines on top of that. I've not read The Lottery, but I do know The Lottery because of the play. Anyways, he invites her to sit with him, and this makes her happy. Like, it says she worked hard not to show how happy this invitation made her. Meanwhile, she's been like, I'm unhappy, nothing can make me happy. But there's not more emphasis on this. Usually the issue in these stories has been that they'll put too much emphasis on something that isn't important. This seems like there's not enough emphasis on something that is important. Anyways, they have tea together, and she talks about wanting to be a librarian, and he says that would be a good job for her. Time passes, and she continues to eat lunch with him. Sometimes she felt a little silly for spending so much time thinking about a boy. But Dylan wasn't just any ordinary boy. There's a holiday party coming up that her grandpa kind of forces her to go to. It's mentioned that gingerbread is her favorite cookie, which I find it funny for somebody who fucking hates the holidays. That her favorite cookie is a holiday cookie. I don't know if that's the joke of it, I found it ironic. Anyways, she sees Dylan holding hands and being all coupley with this one blonde girl, and it pisses her off and makes her so upset that she leaves the holiday party early and forces her grandpa to leave. And this pisses her off so much that she really wants to die. Cutting back to the animatronic shit, Funtime Freddy says that he feels like he's a waiter talking about a menu, but instead of food, it's different types of death. The difference, of course, is that one menu gets you fed, The other menu gets you dead. He's so unserious. What is this? Goosebumps? He also says that he could boil her alive and easily flood his insides with water, which doesn't make any fucking sense because he's a robot and that would short circuit him. But whatever. Anyway, she snaps at Dylan and he's like, girl, I'm sorry if you felt misled, but we weren't in a relationship. I don't know why you're pissed. She's blonde and basic, Millie said. No need to mince words. The truth was the truth. Have you ever had a conversation with her? Dylan asked. Do you even know what she's like? She's like, no. And he basically calls her out for being hypocritical because people judge her for her appearance, but now she's doing the same thing about this Brooke girl. He's pissed off at her and they stop eating lunch together. By the way, the only reason he wasn't eating lunch with his girlfriend is because she's in a different lunch period. Now, I could see some people reading this and be like, he was leading her on. Me personally, as a guy where like a lot of my friends are girls, like I give them gifts and I'm affectionate. I feel like it's weird to assume just because somebody is the opposite gender that it has to be romantic. He even apologizes, being like, I'm sorry if I misled you. She's talking to her grandpa and is like, I'm not celebrating Christmas, and is just like really fucking rude to him. He has the patience of a fucking saint. This is the first time he seems actually like kind of mad at her, but even then he doesn't like snap at her or anything. He's just like, I'm going to my workshop. Anyway, she's fucking listening to this rock guy again, her favorite band or whatever. Millie felt like Kurt Carrion might be the only person on the planet who would understand her. Who was she kidding? Nobody would. I hate her so bad. Funtime Freddy talks about decapitation. The holiday party starts and her aunt and uncle and her grandpa and her cousins are all over. And she's being a fucking buzzkill per usual. And they call her downstairs and she's like, this is stupid, and is shit talking the holiday. She reflects on what Dylan said when he called her a hypocrite, to which she decides that she's not a hypocrite, she's a truth teller, and if some people couldn't handle the truth, that was their problem. She's actually so horrible. Anyway, she leaves, and then she sneaks into the garage to hide from her family. And this is where she finds Funtime Freddy, and she decides to hide inside of him so that her family doesn't find her. The family's kind of worried because she's been gone for a while, but the grandpa's like, no, she'll come back whenever she feels like she's made her point. So this is presumably where all the shit we've been seeing throughout this story with Funtime Freddy starts, where he's like, hey, how do I fucking kill you? Sorry I'm cursing a lot. This one in particular pissed me off. Anyways, it's implied she gets decapitated, and he says it's a punishment for being rude and judgmental, like very on the nose with what the lesson is. You, the voice had said, have been rude and quick to anger. You have rushed to the judgment of others. You have been insufficiently grateful to those who have shown you nothing but love and kindness. Like, Jesus, we get it. It's immoral. A blade slices through the chamber. It's not confirmed that she died. I assume she did. And the story ends with her grandpa being like, alright, I guess we'll wait for her. But of course, she's presumably dead in this animatronic suit. The first two stories at least have the, you know, benefit of having effective horror. This one was just bad. It wasn't scary. It wasn't interesting. And the protagonist is the most insufferable out of the three not very likable protagonists in this. Definitely my least favorite of the three stories. Alright, before we get into the full book review, I want to talk about the epilogue. I don't even know if you call it that, but there is like a few pages at the end that add something else, and they aren't marked at all to tell you what it is. The way it's written, I'm pretty sure it's just like sequel bait so that they can sell more of these terrible books, because this does say #1. And while I was at Barnes & Noble, I did see more in this series, but it's not marked at all, so I read it. Basically, there's this detective named Detective Larson. His life sucks. His wife left him. He barely got to see his kid. He hates his life, and he spends all his time at work. Anyways, his boss comes in and gives him an envelope. They keep talking about something called the Stitch Wraith, which sounds like the town boogeyman. They do briefly mention Sarah's disappearance from the second story. She was the girl who turned into garbage. And they're like, yeah, it sounds weird, but we talked to psychologists and we had them, you know, examine all of the witnesses, and they all said the same thing. They all seem to believe it. And there's a spooky guy in a mask running around with what seems like a mannequin, which I'm assuming is Eleanor, the animatronic. It doesn't really add anything to the book, nor does it tie all three stories together, since again, it only really references the second one. My guess is that Fazbear Frights has like an overarching story with this detective. For me, I'm not necessarily planning on reading any more of these books unless people really want me to, so I got nothing out of it, but it is a part of the book and I knew people would probably comment if I didn't bring it up. Now for the actual review portion. This book is really bad. This is not a good book. The first story, definitely the best. Still bad, and it has a lot of plot holes, but that felt the most well-rounded, which is probably why it's the title one. I do also want to point out, this does have a co-author named Elley Cooper. At the end, she thanks Scott Cawthon for letting her spend time in his dark and twisted universe. I don't know how much she contributed to this. You would think there being a co-author would make it less fucking messy, but apparently not. So far as I know, she's just as guilty as Scott. This book also doesn't really have a lot to do with Five Nights at Freddy's. Like, obviously the first story does, not only because of the Into the Pit game, but because it has Spring Bonnie and it's at Freddy Fazbear's. But the other two, the only connection really is just that they involve animatronics. Like, I don't really get why this is marketed as, oh, Five Nights at Freddy's, when overall it doesn't have a lot to do with Five Nights at Freddy's, like, at all. The horror in the first two stories was very effective. Oswald's dad getting swapped out with Spring Bonnie and the way that was portrayed was really creepy. And then the body horror in the second story was very upsetting. The horror in the third book is, like, the general idea of, oh, you're about to die, but it's treated so unseriously that it's not remotely creepy, which is really unfortunate, especially because that's how the book closes out, not including the epilogue. The epilogue, which added nothing, really. It's very bad. It does not make me want to read more Fazbear Frights books. Again, if you guys really, really want me to, then I will, but I'm not in a rush to go buying Volume 2. It's very Goosebumps-esque, bad writing and all, but Goosebumps has like a campy charm that this just does not have. This is just fucking annoying. I was mostly annoyed reading this, especially the third story. The graphic novelizations of the first two stories were not good, or the second one was fine, but the first one was really bad. I looked it up, it seems like the third story doesn't have a graphic novelization at all, which good, it doesn't deserve one. Overall, those didn't really add much to this. It was just an interesting thing to look at and compare for the video. It also bothered me, the repeating names. I would love for Scott Cawthon to look up baby names once in his life so he doesn't keep using the same 5 names for everything. I cannot say I recommend this book in any serious manner. I had fun laughing at parts of it, but if you want an actually good horror book, cannot recommend this. Even if you like Five Nights at Freddy's, like I said, it doesn't really have a lot to do with Five Nights at Freddy's, so I still don't recommend it. It's just a bad book. But that was the video. If you enjoyed, then, you know, subscribe, like, do all the things. I will actually be selling my copy of this book with all of my markings and stuff on eBay. So if you're interested in that, it will be $4 plus shipping. You can check the description to see if the listing is still active. I'll only be shipping within the US. Yeah, if that's something that interests you, that's available. I see no benefit in me keeping this book. I'll also be selling the graphic novel, which you can also find on my eBay page, but it's not, like, I didn't mark in it at all. This video was fun to make, though. I do plan to read more bad books for the sake of content. I really want to read a Colleen Hoover book. I feel like that would be fun. So, you know, I primarily do, like, gaming and song covers and vlog content. But, you know, stick around and maybe I'll do another video like this, because this one is fun to make. I will see you whenever I see you again. Stay safe, stay hydrated, and have a lovely day.